Today's objective is to store the value returned by a function in a variable for use in a program. So now that you've had a fair amount of practice working with the basic mechanics of variables and learning how to debug your own problems, you're more than ready to start using variables in apps. This lesson is subtly one of the most important for you as a programmer. You should have a good mental model for how programs execute code and how machines work in general. So some research has shown that being able to answer questions about simple variable reassignment correlates highly with doing well in programming overall. So you're on your way. And in the last lesson, I really emphasized the importance of understanding variables and how important that is to your ability to do well with programming in general. So a quick vocab review from yesterday. So a quick vocab review from last time. A data type. These are values in programming languages, such as a number or a Boolean or a string, that dictates how the computer will interpret it. And the example I used last time was 7 plus 5, two numbers, and that will be interpreted differently at the machine level than the string 7 and 5. The next one is expression. This is any valid unit of code that resolves to a value. And the last one is variable. The definition here says a placeholder for a piece of information that can change. Remember last time I'm saying that the variable is basically an address in memory. So when you think variable, think memory. There's a simple command called write in the UI controls toolbox that is a fast and easy way to display text in the app itself. The way you use it is very similar to console.log. Let's debug another problem only using write instead of console.log. So your think right share here is what is the similarity and difference between write and console.log. And it's worth mentioning again, to display the value of a variable, you should not use quotes. Notice the difference between these two statements. The comments next to each line explains the differences. So when you write the score, you're writing this. You're writing the word score onto the app screen. But if we have a variable called score and that variable's number changes depending on how you behave as the user on the app, well, when it writes to the app screen, it's going to show that value, not the word score. Funny comic I thought you'd enjoy. This guy says, keep in mind that I'm self-taught, so my code may be a little messy. This girl says, let me see, I'm sure it's fine. And then she says, wow, this is like being in a house built by a child using nothing but a hatchet and a picture of a house. It's like a salad recipe written by a corporate lawyer using a phone autocorrect that only knew Excel formulas. It's like someone took a transcript of a couple arguing at IKEA and made random edits until it compiled without errors. Okay, I'll read a style guide, the guy says. So with that said, I want you to reflect here on coding, programming in general. Why is syntax important? So another think, write, share. Think back to the last two slides. I talked about data type in the vocab review, and then I talked about displaying the value of a variable. With that said, what is wrong with this following code? It's so common to want to create a variable and give it an initial value that JavaScript has a shortcut that lets you create and assign with one line of code like this. So your think right share is when you type in var score 0, what is the purpose of this small one line of code? And your answer should somehow talk about the idea that this is just an initial value, that the number is not very important. It will change, very likely will change, and 0 is a good starting point. So you need at least a placeholder to begin the program. And here's a tip: when you're working with variables, say gets instead of equals. So we know that the equal sign in a JavaScript statement is like A equals B. It isn't a statement of mathematical equality. It's an instruction to move memory around. We'll talk about how to do mathematical equalities in JavaScript soon, but for now, we'll just focus on the meaning of a single equal sign. One tip is to read a statement like var score gets 0 as the variable score gets a value of 0, or maybe just score gets 0, to be brief, right? So another example is A gets B plus 7. As we're about to see, there are other ways to store values in variables besides just hard-coding single numbers, but in all cases, even when it's more complicated, using the word gets when you see a single equal sign will help your mental model of what's happening. So paying attention to detail is very important, and that is especially true in programming. When you have a statement like result gets 5.0 plus 7, realize that this does not store a mathematical expression in the variable. Rather, with this instruction, you are asking to compute 5 plus 7 and then store the answer, which is a single number, in the variable. So your think right here is, what will the computer store in the following variable? Var Jordan gets 20 plus 3. Pretend you're programming a game. Be as creative as you'd like here. For example, change the name of variables and values. Think right here, write an expression that calculates the player's total score and stores it in the total score variable. The calculation is the player's points times lives divided by the total time. Essentially, I'm asking you to rewrite line 8 for me and post it on Canvas. And the first game that comes to my mind is Super Mario, how you're jumping around, doing things, getting coins sometimes, killing enemies, or jumping on their heads at other times, and you see the point total at the top right-hand corner of the screen. It changes, and I'm not totally sure what that formula is, so extra credit if you could figure that one out. Programs become much more interesting when the values and variables change while the program is running. We can also assign to a variable the value returned by a function. Because the random number function evaluates to a number, it means we can treat it as though it were a number. We've used it before just by plugging it in to some function that needed a number as a parameter, like move forward a random number. So because the random number function generates a new and different number each time you call it, one thing we could not do before we had variables was generate a random number and use that same number for two different things in a program, and now we can. So your task is to write a program that simulates the rolling of two dice and reports their individual values as well as the sum. So the program should generate two random numbers between 1 and 6 and store each result in its own variable, display the individual values of the two dice, display the sum of the two dice, and I'll help you get started. You just need to make some additions to the following code. So write rolling dice, var die1 gets a random number 1 to 6, and then write you rolled a, and then the variable will be displayed. And this right here is actually a really good hint to the question that I asked you right here. What is wrong with this code? You can pause it here, look at it, and then go over to this one, and you should definitely have your answer by looking at this one right here. So programs become even more interesting when we can interact with the user, and a short way to ask a user for a number is with the prompt num command, which prompts up a dialog box asking a user to enter a number. So let's use prompt num to make a simple calculator, and the prompt num command appears in the variable toolbox because it's typically used as a way to get a value from the user that you want to hold on to while the program runs. So your think right here is write a program that acts as a simple calculator, ask the user to enter a number, then ask the user to enter a second number, display the result. I'll give you some starter code just like last time, and the rest of the code is up to you. So write my division calculator, variable num equals prompt num, enter the first number to divide, and you do the rest. Now to reassign a value to a variable, all you have to do is maintain the mental model of what's happening. Variables are containers for information. The equal sign is an instruction to set the value. So a series of assignment statements is a list of instructions to execute one at a time, so it's not a series of equations. Your think right here after that is study the code and make a prediction about what will happen when you run it. What will the values of A and B be at the end of this program right here? So the right answer is 14, and you can write this to your app screen or in the console either way. A becomes 7, and then B becomes 7, though that's what it was originally, and thus 7 plus 7 is 14. And I think you really want to pause here and think about what's going on. I am positive that on the test you will be looking at situations where variables are changing and they want to know what the end value of a variable is. So all of our examples so far have shown you how to set the value of a variable by using combinations of numbers and other variables. But what if you wanted to do something like add 10 to the current value of a variable? Because updating the value in a variable is just moving memory around, the process has to go something like this. So that was a pretty heavy coding lesson. I have a fun challenge for you at this link. I'll post it on Canvas for your convenience. I really like this one because you work with the console.log statements, meaning the directions are actually in the statement. You just write the code to make it happen. So bubble number 24 is challenging. Let me know if you get this one on your first try. With that said, the end of the lesson, choose an IB attribute to connect to today's lesson, and your DOL. Just tell me what A, B, and C will be.